with me. I had printer problems, so I had to write it out. So, dear Marcia, that was a fantastic event you organized last evening. Everything went well, and I enjoyed it enormously. Thank you so very much, and thank you for your dogged efforts on behalf of the GOP on the West Side. This is not a task for the faint of heart. Many thanks again for a warmly memorable time. Best, Steve.
That's great.
I hope you appreciated that as much as I did.
Yes.
We'll see. We need to find a benefactor. If you might have noticed, we are no longer called the Gertrude and Morrison Parker West Side Republican Club. We are now the West Side Republican Club because we no longer, the heirs to, unfortunately, the heirs to Gertrude and Morrison Parker have found other places for their funds. So we are looking for someone to take over. It don't require a lot of money, and we would even put your name on our club.
Marcia,
Whatever it is.
you might want to say how expensive it is to rent this room.
Yeah, well, I have done that before. We have the cheapest rent in the city, but it's still $450 each month, just for 2 hours. So,
Wow, just 2 hours.
but other places are over 1,000. Believe me, we've done a lot of these. Not for Republicans, just like we were at the SHA, and that was a really nice place and really same rent. And and they say everybody is welcome in their logo, but apparently not Republicans. So that's why we're not there anymore. And, okay, now we're going to have a great speaker tonight. But before, we're also having a good speaker. We are a political club, so we always give candidates the floor. And we have Carolyn Schinkel, who is running for the Congressional District 12. That's the seat that Jerry Nadler has held. And so we'd like to hear from her. She'll tell you about herself. It's a daunting task, as we know from other candidates that we have supported in the past. But maybe there's a little opening this year since Jerry is retiring.
Bravo.
Can everybody hear me? Is this good?
Yes.
All right, great. Thank you, Marcia. First of all, thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. Hello, everybody. I'm Caroline Schinkel, and like any New Yorker, I like to think big. Always have. That's why I'm running for Congress as a Republican here in Manhattan, New York's 12th congressional district. Can you still hear me from over here? Yeah. Okay, great.
It's better than a mic, please.
Okay.
We're recording it also.
Yes, sir. Okay, that's why I'm running as a Republican here in New York's 12th congressional district, really the eye of the political storm. I'm running for Congress to give voters here in Manhattan a real choice on the ballot and to resurrect the power of private enterprise, pride, and prosperity in our city. Now, I don't have to tell you, but we know that our city is on the brink. From crime, to socialism, to anti-Semitism, to the out-of-control cost of living in our city, I think this critical time in history calls for a different kind of Republican candidate who has the experience and the background to usher in a new age of unbridled prosperity in New York. So here I am. A little bit of background on me. I'm a graduate of MIT and Harvard Law School. I've spent a lot of time in the People's Republic of Cambridge. I've worked at global central banks all over the world and here at home at the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. I've worked at the highest levels of corporate law here in New York City. I understand how the economy works. I've lived overseas, including in Jerusalem, when I was working at the Bank of Israel. So combating anti-Semitism is a key priority of mine. I'm also a long-term union member. Yes, I'm a longtime member of SAG-AFTRA, and I'm a lifelong Republican. No, I'm a numbers person, and I understand this is a tough district, but I'm optimistic that given the current reality with the recent mayor's race, people are ready for fresh, bold, alternative leadership that will deliver tangible solutions to the out-of-control Democrat inflation and outrageous cost of living here in Manhattan. But this can and must be done without stealing any more money from the taxpayers. Thank you. Now, our current congressman, Jerry Nadler, who, by the way, has held this seat since before I was born, has not done a single thing to address the cost of living issue. In fact, he's consistently voted for deficit spending, which is why we've all been subjected to the triple whammy that is high federal taxes, high inflation, and high interest rates on top of a record national debt. Maybe that's a quadruple whammy. You can be the judge, but I guarantee you, any Democrat elected in the 12th will continue to vote this failed record. That is what Democrats do. But that is not what I will do. I'm a free enterpriser. I'm focused on economic empowerment. It's time to build a bigger pie, not seize and redistribute opportunity. We need to create the conditions to empower individuals to build, whether that's a company, a career, a family, a future, to build their dreams. And we can do this through smart economic policy. So I hope you'll join me. I hope you'll start spreading the news. We're going to reclaim New York City. Please visit carolinefornewyork.com to learn more, and I look forward to meeting all of you tonight. Thank you.
Carolyn, do you want to take one or two questions? Do you want to take one or two?
I'm happy to take
All right,
questions.
Just the two, all right? Carolyn. Yes,
Question, please. Do you have a Republican primary fight? Because I know there are two people, one of like Haley Aldrich, is it possible Republican, and one or two other people?
Yeah, I mean, there could be a primary. The primary would happen in late June. Yeah, and the general is obviously in November.
Okay, good luck.
Thank you so much.
Jim, and then we'll move on.
Caroline,
Yes.
came out of the poll working in this
Yes.
city and assemblies, and I understand the numbers in this area. How are you gonna do outreach to Gen Z in terms of demographics? I think that's an inflection point that Republicans can win, especially across aisles.
100%. We need to take the message to the voters. That includes Gen Z. And I think social media is a critical piece of that. The
Could you
Democrats are.
speak in the
Yes, absolutely. I think social media is a critical piece of that. And I think people in New York City, from the conversations I've had with not only Republicans and conservatives, but Democrats and independents, they're ready for new leadership, they're ready for a new message and a new messenger, so I'm here to do that.
It's critical in outreach to this.
Absolutely, social media, phone, absolutely. Thank you, Jen.
Thanks.
Yes.
Well, I just wanted to know if you're a globalist, are you for ESG, are you for DEI? I ask you because of your international background, and many people in your field are for all those things.
It's a great question. Yes, I have experiences all over the world, but I'm ready to bring those experiences back home to bear for the benefit of the United States. So I believe in peace through strength and peace through prosperity, and that we need to globalize the principles upon which our country was founded from a position of strength.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Marcia. Thank you, everybody.
I'd like to ask you all to turn down your cell phones. When I heard Jason Jason Curtis Anderson speak at a Monday meeting, I was blown away, not only by his efforts through One City Rising to solve New York City problems, but also by his extraordinary investigative research to uncover the radical groups thwarting those efforts, fomenting unrest and creating chaos. This is someone our club needs to hear from, I immediately thought. Quite forthcoming, Mr. Anderson readily gave me his card, and when I called without too much advance notice, he similarly did everything possible to be with us tonight, for which we are grateful. Affable though he may be, Mr. Anderson was also somewhat mysterious, reluctant to provide many personal details, for he is hampered by non-disclosure agreements and concern about putting his and his family's personal safety at risk. While respectful of those concerns, I nonetheless put my research skills to work to craft an introduction reflective of our speaker's many accomplishments, the latest of which is co-founding One City Rising. Now 2 years old, the nonpartisan One City Rising's mission is to offer practical, common-sense solutions to New York City's problems, from homelessness and mental health to public safety and election reform. To further OCR's mission, Jason, who also co-founded the Free Up Foundation, a non focused on homelessness at the national level, brings years of experience as a New York State lobbyist, investigative journalist, and political consultant who has managed marketing campaigns for politicians and Fortune 500 companies. As an investigative journalist, he regularly collaborates with the New York Post. One article of note was Mamdani Backer, who works for NYC Campaign Finance Board, is a longtime socialist operative with links to terror groups. From this, we can see why his present investigation into the dynamics of permanent protest movements, for which he shuttles between NYC and DC, might worry our city's current socialist administration. Although he cannot elaborate on personal details, we look forward to this 26-year veteran of New York City elaborating on the work of One City Rising and revealing the radicals undermining public order. We are proud to welcome Jason Curtis Anderson to the West Side and to the West Side Republican Club.
Gonna be great. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. So, thank you for the introduction. I appreciate it. Got that out of the way. So let's get into the information that I felt like was appropriate to share with this group in particular. So, I don't think the average person, even the average politically engaged person, really understands how power works. Even when we started One City Rising, excuse me?
Speak directly into the.
A little higher?
Speak directly into the mic. Let me pause this, hold on. You got it? Let's see.
A big part of what I've been doing for the last 5 years or so is really trying to understand how power really works. And when we started One City Rising, it was really to focus on local New York City issues. And I had no interest in national politics, in international issues. I wanted to make a difference right here where I live, where we all live. And I felt like this was really the path for our organization. And I'm very happy about the progress we've made. We do a lot of educational work about power and problems and solutions, and try to help the general public really understand how New York City itself really works, which is actually more complicated than people understand. Going on to the information that's on the slide, while I consider myself a very local person, and that I care about local politics and local policy, with that all being said, even when politics are local, information is not local. It's not contained into a bucket. Money that goes into our local politics also does not come from local sources either. Influence does not come locally, and power itself, it doesn't fit neatly into buckets. And I think even the average voter, the average person in this room cares deeply about politics, does not understand how fluid all of these things really are. So a lot of the stuff that I do is dispelling myths about power and influence and politics and nonprofits and foundations and how things work. So a lot of that comes with asking questions, right? How New York State political parties should work, right? So here we clearly have what I would consider, an ideal scenario of 3 healthy parties, right? A healthy Democratic Party, a healthy Republican Party, and a healthy Independent Party. Well, everyone who's in this room understands that we do not have these 3 things, right? So what do we really have? So we really have a outsized Democratic Party, a almost nil Independent Party, and a Republican Party that's also really outsized, but the Democratic Party is really hitched to this other world, a political machine, if you will, of Democrat NGOs and their local nonprofits, right? I'm sure everyone in this room has heard about the large-scale billion-dollar Democrat foundations that sort of run the country. But the thing is, everyone's heard of them, but most people don't really understand how they work, right? So how do they actually work? Well, the foundations, the billion-dollar foundations, are national entities, right? But in order for them to exert influence over a state, they need local nonprofit entities to carry out that influence, right? So when you look at the organizations coalescing Democrat voters or pushing for certain policies, whether they be criminal justice reforms or immigration-related policies in New York State, you'll often find similar chapters of those same organizations in New York, in other states like California, Texas, and Chicago. However, if you don't see chapters of one of those organizations in those other states, it will be a different entity with a different name, but the funding is always the same. The funding always goes back to the same billion-dollar foundations. So let's talk about those foundations a little bit. Well, I'll get into it in a second. So let's talk a little bit about political parties and ballots, right? Because the ballots really dictate the reality of so much that what we have to deal with. So on the left, you could see parties that currently have automatic ballot access in New York State: Conservative Party, Democrat Party, Republican Party, and the Working Families Party. And then you have these other older entities that have fallen off the ballot and no longer have automatic ballot access: Green Party, Independent, Liberal, Libertarian, etc. So the Working Families Party having its own ballot line, makes me ask questions about really what they are, what they represent, because everyone knows what Democrats and Republicans are. Everyone knows the ideas of conservatism, right? So what is the Working Families Party? I have a lot of questions. So what is the Working Families Party? Is the Working Families Party socialist? What is the DSA and why were they not listed in any of the previous slides? Is the DSA actually communist? They always claim that they're socialist, but are they actually? This is an important question for us to ask. And how much do these large foundations, these national multi-billion-dollar foundations, we call them NGOs, non-governmental organizations, how much does their money influence local elections? It's an important question, right? Because we want influence over our own elections. We don't want billion-dollar national foundations influencing and controlling them, do we? So now we're going to talk a little bit about how these NGOs and billion-dollar foundations foundations fund the local activists and nonprofits. At the bottom are the local nonprofits that really mobilize behind Zoran's administration, but behind his campaign. You can see Make the Road, the New York Immigration Coalition, the Working Families Party, a South Asian Muslim organization called Desi's Rising Up and Moving to Queens, New York Communities for Change, the DSA, Jews for Racial and Economic Justice, CARE. I'll save the jokes for later. Vocal New York, had a bone to pick with that organization for many years at this point. And I just wanted to highlight which organizations really got out the vote for him, and then above them are the various funding sources for all of them. So you can see the Open Society Foundation, Tides, Ford, Rockefeller, and then I put New York State grants, City Council discretionary funds, and membership dues. Some of these organizations function from membership dues. Some of them just get massive money from these large-scale NGOs and foundations. So what does that NGO economy really look like? What I did on this slide is I broke out the amount of money that belongs to each one of these different NGOs and their various legal entities, which are a combination of C3s and C4s and action committees and PACs, really. So you can see that the total of this economy, of the NGO economy, which is kind of a shadowy government economy if you think about it, is over $4.13 billion. This is the total amount of what I was able to gather by looking at just their most recent 990s, which most of them actually from 2024 still. NGO spending towers over political spending.
That's amazing.
So if the DNC spent $153 million in the 2024 election, and the RNC spent a little bit more with 172, NGO spending topped $2.8 billion.
Is that locally or nationally?
That's nationally towards, let's call them left-wing activist groups, from here to California, from Maine to California, right?
There's all political spending?
This, well, think about it like this. All of the advocacy groups also get out the vote. So they're doing political activity even though none of them are legally allowed to. The more advanced ones have a C3 and a C4 arm, so they should technically be able to do that stuff. But when it's the same individuals, and you have a C3 and a C4, you just choose to wear the C3 hat and the C4. You know what I mean? It shouldn't be legal, is what I'm saying. So,
I'm just a little confused. The 2.8 billion, but I thought the previous slide was over 4 billion.
oh, this is how much money they spent into local activist groups in 2024 spending cycle. This is the amount of money in their bank accounts. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So now we're going to talk about the Working Families Party, because I think this is an entity that many people are actually very confused about. So they were founded in 1998 in New York, and it originated as a coalition of labor unions, community organizations, including an organization called ACORN, actually got in a lot of trouble, and some other organizations to build a progressive third-party force and empower working-class voters. It qualified for the New York State ballot line after receiving over 50,000 votes in its first election year, and it's been on the ballot line ever since. So party type, they're supposed to be a minor political party in the United States with an explicit progressive/social democratic orientation, right? They don't deny this. It recruits and endorses candidates, it trains them, and it sometimes runs them on its own ballot line. It does endorsements for certain people that it does not run on their ballot line too. So the endorsements are a larger group, and then the ballot line people are a smaller contingent. And when possible, it often cross-endorses candidates running as Democrats under state fusion voting rules. And it often endorses DSA members, right? It would be untrue to say that they are the same organization, because they are not. But the likelihood and the frequency of them endorsing DSA candidates is very high. So their stated goals, which is important to understand, right? Because a lot of people say something and do another, right? Is to build political power for workers, multiracial communities, and grassroots progressives, to fight economic inequality, expand social safety nets, strengthen unions, push for higher minimum wage, paid family and medical leave, public education investment, campaign finance reform, and to resist what they describe as entrenched wealth and political interest domination in the US political system. To me, that sounds like they oppose large, dark money from billionaires.
It's not true?
So let's take a look at their finances. Their operating budget in 2024 was $42.3 million.
That's just the state of New York, right?
Yeah,
Got it.
yeah.
A lot of dues there.
This is their New York entity. It's $42.3 million. And you could see this really large scaling up in their budget health from 2019 up. You can see in 2019, they only had $8 million in the bank. So to scale up to 42 is rather significant. And then when you look at their donors, I see the Open Societies Foundation, Tides Foundation, and the Arabella Advisors Network. I'm not sure if any of you guys watched the congressional hearing today. It was about foreign influence in America's nonprofit sector, but about a quarter of it was about the Arabella Advisors Network, which, yes. The Arabella Advisors Network received a really large donation from a man from Switzerland. I think his name is Hans Spies, I believe, who's basically Switzerland's version of George Soros. And he meddles entirely in American politics by putting together this network called the Arabella Advisors Network, which then has a whole bunch of different foundations under it, which distributes the money to large-scale, extremely well-funded protest groups that were stood up in 2017. So if you were to ask me what those large-scale protest groups are, what they represent, I would say that they were stood up in 2017 as what we would call omni-cause organizations that are obviously have access to infinite funding, but were just really intended to oppose Trump on everything he did, no matter what. So the organizations funded by the Arabella Advisors Network do a lot of anti-Trump stuff, but they also lean into Palestine stuff, and then they lean into climate stuff, and then they lean into whatever the divisive issue is at any given day. And they're very well funded, so they've got to prove results. They've got to show, you give us hundreds of millions of dollars, we're going to put that to work, right?
Excuse me. Do they pay for attorneys working to impeach Trump? Is that related to
A lot of
this?
these networks do. There's a whole legal and civil rights arm of these networks as well, yes. So let's take a look at some of these dollar amounts here, because if you go back to their stated mission that says they want to resist entrenched wealth and political interest domination, right? So we see, let's see, $69 million from the Tides Foundation, $47 million from the State Democracy Project, which is all tied up with Open Society's money, and then $20 million from Open Societies and $14 million from another Tides account. And then at the bottom there is roughly $2.2 million from the Arabella Advisors Network. These are the largest political donors in America, period.
This Chinese guy with a white.
Yeah, he's not really in this presentation. We could talk about it later. So let's take a look at the recent endorsements from the Working Families Party. If you look on the left, This is a long list of DSA members. If you look on the right, you see a lot of progressive Democrats where they might not technically be DSA members, but their policies are not very different, are they? Right? You see Lincoln Ressler, Crystal Hudson, Sandy Nurse, Shahana Hanif. If they're not DSA members, they might as well be, right? So is the Working Families Party socialist? Is a good question, right? Considering the public opinion about the Working Families Party is just that they are the trusted, mainstream Democrat, get out the vote organization for New York State. Well, Bernie Sanders called them the closest thing that America has to socialism, as you could see in his quote. Why? Because the Working Families Party is the closest thing there is to a political party that believes in my vision, democratic socialism, shares my view of a society and economy that works for everyone, not just the wealthy and well-connected. Very, very strange considering they're billionaire back.
$14 billion in real estate.
So, in case anyone's forgotten, the goal of socialism is communism, as per Vladimir Lenin, right? So, being a socialist organization in New York State should come with some sting to it. We should really not be brushing off the dangers that these ideas pose and what they want to force down on all of us, really. When you look at the Working Families Party's funding, I have trouble saying it's independent from Open Societies and George Soros, because if you look at this recent article, from summer, it's $37 million that Soros funneled into the Working Families Party and affiliated organizations, right? So it's really, at this point, George Soros's local vehicle for influencing elections in New York State. And it should be deemed as that, and it should be deemed as socialist, and it should be deemed as communist. This is an incomplete chart of me beginning to money map all of the various entities that launder money into the Working Families Party machine in the center of this document. I still need to draw another 30 or 40 lines on this, but you can see this is really going back to this $37 million that's here. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the DSA, right? Because they just won the mayor's race. Actually, they just won.
They won in
236,
where John Donnie used to have.
We have 250 DSA elected officials across the country right now.
Wow.
250. And they announced yesterday that they just passed 100,000 members nationwide. And 11,000 in New York City, by the way. So, I've got questions. You need to understand this a little bit better. So the DSA was founded in 1982 as a merger of two other, let's call them just far-left political organizations that were around back at that time. And they traced their ideological root back to a guy named Michael Harrington, who was a socialist activist who sort of shaped this entity. And it was originally established as a left-wing pressure group, and it has grown into the largest socialist organization in the United States, with chapters in every state and a really strong presence on college campuses. While we have a two-party, for the most part, two-party system, with third parties historically failing to gain significant traction, the DSA never filed to be its own party because it chose to attach itself to the Democratic Party to transform it from the inside. And as a person who's watched hundreds of their conferences before, they hate the Democrats. They say it in their conferences all of the time. But Democrats do not have the backbone to push back against them for lots of different reasons. here's really how I think about it. I think that if you're in the party and you have a good job, Senate, Congress, City Council, wherever it may be, State Assembly, you have some power and you have some influence. And if you attack the groups to the left of you, the members of those organizations to the left of you who are also in power or running against you, this opens you up to attacks from the left. Anyone who's got a cushy job and wants to keep it in the Democratic Party does not want to open themselves from attacks to the left. Because they view it mainly as the younger, energized movement within the party. And they just think there's nothing they can do to push back against it. So people in the party that I know and that I like and that are not problematic politicians whatsoever are scared to address this publicly, even if they're very scared about it privately. So DSA have strategically embedded themselves within the Democratic Party, and they use the more palatable label of democratic socialism to push their agenda, but in reality, it's a Marxist, Leninist, and communist party with a communist caucus in it, which we're going to take a look at in a moment. DSA pushes for policies that are fundamentally opposed to mainstream American values, including defunding the police, abolishing private property, eliminating borders, and dismantling capitalism itself. So let's take a look at their financial health. In 2024, they had a $5.4 million operating budget. This is not a small budget for a group that I think the general public tends to see as, like a 20-something sort of, radical leftist. So it's over $5 million in the bank. It's very serious, right? And then when you look at the breakdown of where that money comes from, a lot of it does not actually come from those large foundations and NGOs I was talking about before. 90% of it is membership dues. See all the yellow in this chart? Membership dues. This is all people paying dues to be in this organization and then volunteering to run it.
Wow, that's scary.
Are we all familiar with how many people Zoran campaigned for Zoran and volunteered?
686,000.
It was a lot. These people, not only did he have more volunteers than anyone we've ever seen, they paid membership dues to volunteer.
Was it not close to 100, the figure of 50,000?
North of 50, I think.
Right, so not 600.
Yeah.
While I'm on the topic of numbers.
Could you speak up,
I'm sorry,
please?
when you say that they've elected 250 people to
Yes.
national office, just for me, I'm ignorant on this point, how many offices are there total in the US? I mean, it
So
must be
that's
thousands,
split,
but I don't know.
that's split between city councils and state assemblies
Right.
and like all sorts of like lower level
Right.
things in different states as well.
Okay,
Yeah. It's got that.
I'm sorry. Dog catches.
So, just a little bit more proof that they're not a political party. When you look them up on the FEC website, the only thing that comes up is these 3 PACs that they made to dump money into a couple of different elections. The $5 million that we saw in their budget goes into their operation. It doesn't go into into PACs for major races in the way that most politics really operates. So is the DSA a political party? No, it's not. It is not a political party. It does not have its own ballot line in elections. It is not registered with the FEC. It is a member-driven political and activist organization that supports democratic socialist policies and often endorses or supports candidates running under other party labels, especially the Democratic Party, but sometimes other party lines. And it is a 501c4 entity, which also means that it does not need to reveal its donors. So here's
What
some,
did you say? It doesn't need to last.
Reveal its donors.
yeah, C3s have to reveal their donors, C4s do not.
Ah.
So as of yesterday, they claimed that they now have more than 100,000 members nationwide. In New York City, they have 11,000 members, almost 1,000 that have joined since Zoran's campaign, so this number was 10,000, I want to say in July. They have an estimated 200 chapters around the country in all 50 states. And as of October of 2025, they had 124 student chapters at campuses across the country, and over 250 elected officials in office who identify with or were endorsed by the DSA as of last year. This is what the structure really looks like. I put the co-chairs on it just to sort of show that it does have some serious leadership. But really there are committees and commissions, and there are caucuses, and there are working groups, and there is the student chapter, which I noted there are 124 college student chapters across the country. It's a very serious organization. So then we're going to talk a little bit about how their influence works on politics, okay? These relationships in this web are not on paper relationships, right? These are not things that are easily provable by reverse engineering their finances and their tax returns and stuff like that. But let's go through it. So let's go up first. So from the DSA in the center of this diagram up, we're going to talk about how the DSA influences voting. So everyone in this room probably understands that, like, getting unions to endorse someone has always been a big deal in New York City. It's a voting block, you know, and it's someone you can wheel and deal with, right? And you can say, hey, I'll support your labor union contract if you vote for this guy, and, you know, and a deal is made, and this is how politics has always worked and shouldn't freak anybody out. What should freak you out is the DSA co-opting unions, right? And getting hardcore DSA organizers to join those unions and then to become leaders of those unions.
Wow, that's right.
Okay? Because then you can repurpose the political power of that union towards the DSA's agenda of achieving socialism, which is achieving communism. Also, there's a long history of the Soviet Union trying to organize workers and unions to, you know, to get their way. This is a Soviet playbook from the 1800s. This is a story as old as time, right? So I listed in the unions the CUNY, SLU Union, Workers United, the PSC, CUNY Union, and the UAW Union. But I had to put notes on them about how much control and influence DSA has over each of these unions, and they have full control over the UAW union. The UAW union, even though the initial, the title and the foundation of it is United Auto Workers, right? It's
What about SEIU 1199 here in New York City?
it is partially infected, but I can't say that it's controlled. Yes. The United Auto Workers Union has the title, you know, auto in it because it was about, you know, auto workers at that time. But then they started to take on other causes, and because other industries did not have a union shop to sort of formalize in, so they took on all sorts of civil rights organizations and legal organizations, the National Lawyers Guild, all these different groups. So, like, auto workers does not mean auto workers, and it hasn't for a very, very long time. So they have full control of this national entity, which has a coalition of all these different organizations in it that are members of that union, that are in the medical field or work in docks and, labor and law and civil rights and all these different things. They have strong control over the PSC, CUNY union, partial control over Workers United as well. Through the Working Families Party, they also have access to the Working Families Party ballot line, right? If someone is a DSA candidate and they're endorsed by the Working Families Party, now they're a DSA person on the Working Families Party ballot line, right? And then that DSA person gets reframed to the public as just, sort of rubber stamped by New York State's most mainstream Democrat get out the vote organization, who isn't going to use the same radical language that the DSA would use when trying to pump that person up and build up a profile with younger people. It normalizes them with the public messaging. So that's just voting. I'll get media out of the way. To the left is their access to the media. So I would say that this is a combination of, publications that are either really sympathetic to the DSA's messaging and story, or places like Crain's New York, which is a business publication, which is not a political, Crain's isn't political at all, but Ross Barkin works there, who is a hardcore DSA member and organizer. I think he ran for office, and Zoran was his campaign manager before COVID.
He ran against Gennardis.
Yeah, there you go.
What was that?
Speak up, sir.
He ran against Mike Gianaris.
Who's not running again?
Yeah, exactly. So, anyway, this is how you get like a hardcore DSA operative penning stories that are sympathetic to their long-term goals in Cranes, and no one really understanding what's going on there.
What about, the New York Times is not on that.
Excuse me, but it's very hard to
I'm
hear
sorry.
people. It's like intimate conversation as well.
move up?
I'm sorry, no, I'm just pointing out that, no, if you comment on it. The New York Times is not
probably
on.
belongs on it as well. They just ran a couple pieces by Hassan Piker, who is a hardcore DSA organizer. I actually think Hassan got an apartment here recently just to work with them because he sees socialism and communism growing in New York City. He's been Los Angeles based this entire time until very recently.
Sure is.
So anyway, there's Gothamist, Hellgate, The Guardian, Jacobin, and The Nation. There's all of these different publications that they have to either flat out or subtly promote their long-term agenda. And to the right of this chart, I have what I would consider individual nonprofits, but they're really, in my personal opinion, policy networks, right? These are policy influencing organizations dedicated to individual categories of policy. So there's climate stuff, there's a New York Renews coalition of climate organizations, they're all listed to the right. There's New York Communities for Change, the New York Immigration Coalition, both of those entities are immigration focused. There's Make the Road, which is also immigration focused. Local New York, which pushes for criminal justice reforms, and Housing Justice for All, which is really the DSA's vehicle to push back against revenue and to end private property. Okay. Housing Justice for All is fiscally sponsored by Local New York, which means you can't see under the hood. A fiscal sponsorship means you register as a charity for whatever good cause that you're up to, and you can lend your charitable status to another organization, and they can just use it for tax-deductible donations, and no one can see into their finances anymore. You just become a project where the bank account goes through that, right? Make the Road has also been really instrumental in pushing things like sanctuary city policy in New York City, right? Where New York City politicians and all of our branches of office, the courts, police, and everything are not allowed to interact with ICE or cooperate or share any type of information. This is a policy pushed on us by Make the Road. They passed it in New York City. Make the Road also has massive NGO funding, okay, national NGO funding, okay? And they're also trying to pass Sanctuary City statewide. So no one in New York State can ever pass any information to ICE. So now going down is into the, let's call it like the DSA affiliated protest sector, right? So on the bottom left, we've got the student chapters. Then there is DESI's Rising Up and Moving, which is a Southeast Asian organization that runs out of Queens. Was really instrumental to Zoran's win, also very deeply involved in the protest movement. Then there are the various anti-Israel organizations that have strong overlaps with DSA membership. So if the DSA isn't an official, like you can be in any of these organizations through this whole presentation and be a DSA member. You can work at Working Families Party full-time and be a DSA member. You can work at any of these policy vehicles and be a DSA member. You could be in Antifa and be a DSA member. It's this nebulous thing of a sort of, it's not even an unspoken membership, obviously, because they pay dues, right? And they attend meetings and they have hardcore structure. It's a very serious organization. So then to the right are, what I would call, anarchist groups, right? So Antifa, a new sort of version of it that's a little more tame at the moment, but that's already been responsible for one riot in Atlanta called Stop Cop City. And then the Bronx Anti-War Coalition. I'm not sure if any of you guys saw, there was a vigil in Washington Square Park for Nasrallah, right? The terrorist leader Nasrallah. This was hosted by the Bronx Anti-War Coalition, with shared leadership with the DSA. So, once again, how serious of an organization is the DSA? Sometimes their calendar has more than 10 events in a single day. Okay? Their calendar is so packed, I could only fit half a month on the screen. Okay? They've got classes and meetings and strategy sessions, classes on Marxism, planning protests, speed dating, self-defense classes, anarchist workshops, the support for DSA elected officials, things to push back against private property. They have a run club, neighborhood meetups, and working groups to keep all the new members engaged and make them feel like they're part of something.
It's over New York?
This is just New York. So, many of you probably saw that President Trump designated Antifa a terrorist organization not long ago. So, you should probably ask, is Antifa part of the DSA? Well, if you ask the DSA, they would say yes, because they have a yearly conference where they vote. Are we going to establish new branches of the DSA? Which ones are growing? Which ones don't work anymore? Then we're going to put those ones to bed and focus our energy elsewhere. And at their 2019 national conference, they voted to adopt Antifa as part of the DSA publicly. This is an article from Newsweek.
Jerry Wagner famously said it was it was just an idea.
Yes.
Excuse me, but I'm very frustrated. And I've been sitting on his lap.
You can repeat the question.
You have, everybody here has kind of changed our usual format. Please let Mr. Anderson finish his talk and save your questions for, we have a really good Q&A traditionally, and let's do it that way.
Thank you. So, moving on from Antifa, there's also an organization called the Socialist Rifle Association, which is exactly what you think it is. It is a far-left, anti-Western, pro-Palestine version of the NRA that has chapters all over the country and is doing weapons training all over the country. In certain states, they have upwards of 5 different chapters, like New York. So it's more than 50 chapters. I think it was more than 75, being honest. But there's overlap with the DSA as well, because they share political values together, right? So in certain regions of the country, the DSA chapter and the Socialist Rifle Association chapter are carrying out these weapon training sessions together.
Pretty dangerous.
Here are some photos from one of those sessions this is in upstate, this is actually in Binghamton, New York, and you can see, yeah, this is pretty scary stuff. So we talked a little bit about the Working Families Party and the DSA and these really large-scale, billion-dollar foundations and NGOs that fund all these different organizations. But we haven't really talked about foreign influence at all within those networks. And today is kind of a pressing day, actually, to talk about foreign influence within domestic American nonprofits, because there was a congressional hearing titled exactly that today. Okay? So this report came out on Sunday night, I believe, from an organization called NCRI that said that the DSA is coordinating with several hostile foreign governments. That this is, a Fox News expose. It says that since 2021, they have began a program of sending delegations to Venezuela, Cuba, and China to interact with members, with politicians in those countries, and then came back to America to carry out, to lobby on their behalf and help them achieve their goals within the U.S.
Oh my God.
This is a clear violation of FARA, right? Foreign Agent Registration Act. Any lobbyist organization in America who's doing the bidding of a foreign government has to be registered with FARA. To me, is it important that they get, that they get forced, they get in trouble for FARA violations? Yes, of course, I think that's important. But the nature of the countries that are listed here is also really important, because these are all communist countries. And I'm not sure how much you guys have been watching the news lately, but these countries assist each other in every way, right? I was told recently to think about communist countries as organs of the same body, right? So China doesn't have access to oil. Venezuela produces more oil than anyone, really. So Venezuela's got to get the oil to China somehow. They provide oil for Cuba, for China, etc. These countries do so many things for each other in every category imaginable, including laundering all the money through Chinese bank networks all throughout the country. Here's a photo of a delegation of DSA members with the president of Cuba in 2024, direct meeting him and them. Here's a photo from October of this year of the DSA having a meeting at the Cuban embassy in New York City. And then just 2 weeks later, they posted that they just went to Cuba with over 40 DSA members, and they announced a partnership with an organization there called ICAP, where they, in this thread, they also promised to do more for Cuba upon their return to America. So, yeah, once again, FARA violation. But let's talk about ICAP. ICAP is run by a famous convicted Cuban spy named Fernando Gonzalez. In the 80s, there was a Cuban espionage operation in America called the WASP Network. There's actually a Netflix movie about it from last year. okay? This was the person who was in charge of the WASP network, and he was one of 5 people who got caught. This was the largest, most successful Cuban intelligence operation in American history. He was one of the 5 individuals in charge of it. He got caught. He went to prison for 15 years for espionage. Then he was deported upon his release back to Cuba and gets a job at this place called ICAP. And 2 years later becomes the president of ICAP. ICAP has been a front group for the Cuban intelligence service going back to the 1960s. It is where the Weather Underground learned how to make bombs. It is where all sorts of domestic radical organizations go to be trained, right? They go there under the guise of being politically aligned with Marxism, communism, socialism, etc. Then they're actually getting trained on how to, weapons training, how to make bombs, etc. This has been going on since the late 60s, and it's still going on today. So, aside from the DSA, there is a coalition of far-left organizations that also go on these trips to Cuba. And it's right there on the left. It's called the National Network on Cuba. And they list over 77 different American far-left organizations that have been going on these trips to Cuba to interact with ICAP, which is a front group for their intelligence service. Okay. I highlighted in red the organizations, the American organizations that are part of the Inevitable Risk Network, but what I actually think is more interesting of the groups that are listed in this long list on the left is how they span all these different categories of causes. So there are socialist groups here, and Latin American groups, and Black radical groups, and trans groups, and this and that and the other thing, and they're all going on trips to Cuba to interact with a foreign intelligence service, and they're coming back more radical than they were when they left. So ICAP is a front for the DGI, which is their version of the CIA, and on the right, I listed the DGI's relationships, their foreign network. What does that look like? Well, the DGI has extensive relationships with Iran, with Venezuela, with Russia, with Pakistan, and with terrorist groups who they let set up satellite offices in Cuba. They also have a direct relationship with transnational gangs like Tren de Aragua. I don't know if anyone here knows who Calla Walsh is. She's a very famous far-left activist who recently moved to Lebanon, I believe. But she recently appeared on television saying glory to all the martyrs and to the axis of resistance. I'm curious of how she got there, but on the right, I posted this photo of her and Fernando Gonzalez, the legendary Cuban spy who runs ICAP, and Calla is also the co-president of the National Network on Cuba. So that entire coalition of all of those organizations that go on these Cuba delegations, you can see they showed her on TV and they listed her as the vice president, co-presidente. So you have to wonder, when you see organizations like the DSA live streaming meetings about how to disrupt the military supply chain, where they're getting this, how are they getting this radical? What influences are putting these ideas into their heads? Well, maybe it's a hostile foreign intelligence service because they do have a direct relationship with at least one. The National Network on Cuba, that giant coalition, has their yearly meetings right here at the Cuban Embassy in New York City. And this one in particular, in 2023, wasn't just a generic National Network on Cuba yearly meeting. It was actually about messaging around Palestine, which I find very interesting. 3 days after October 7th. And that is what I brought with me today.
Wow.
Fascinating. That was intense.
All right, now we can as usual, please, 30-second questions. If you have to make a comment, it becomes part of that time. You don't have to thank the speaker, we've already had. And please have a question formulated in your head when you raise your hand. Okay. Yeah.
You pass this back there? Pass this back there, please. Thank you. It's the easiest way, I can't get mine.
It's totally overwhelming what you were talking about, and that you did it in such a calm voice.
Not yet.
Wow.
I'll tell you, I'm not doing this again, by the way.
I first of all would like to obviously thank you, but I'd like to know, first of all, how ESA got a status where they don't have to reveal their sources. You mentioned that, I forget the number. But
501c4s don't have to.
But how did they get that status?
Those entities, those legal entities have been around for a long time. So you can, when you're trying to register a charity, you can register it as a 501c3 or a C4. So C3 means you can accept tax deductible donations, but if you accept tax deductible donations, you have to list who your donors are. When you register as a 501c4, it is you're basically allowed to do lobbying, which you're not allowed to do as a C3, but you do not have to reveal your donors.
But well, I'm not finished. But if they're having like in the millions, they still don't have to reveal the source? No matter how much money it is?
No.
Okay, so then the other thing is,
Barbara,
one
one question.
other thing, what is the solution?
There are
What
five.
is the solution?
One
Thank you, we're moving on now.
I just wanna know if you
One
have a
question.
solution.
Barbara, there are 10 other people who want to ask questions.
There's lots of work to do in this space.
I think you can hear me without the mic. When you were listing the donors, I think I saw Goldman Sachs listed. One of the.
Yes.
Goldman Sachs seems to me is a pillar of the capitalist system. Why are they getting in bed with socialists?
I'm glad to answer that. So, does anyone know what a donor advised fund is?
Yes?
Okay. So, within this dark money world, and this foundation world, and these C3s and C4s, where people may or may not have to list who their donors are, there's another layer that complicates it even further called donor. Tell them, donate it to this political organization, and they do it and it removes my fingerprints from the donation. So the entire foundation, NGO, billion-dollar world is just a million transactions using DAF accounts, which makes it impossible to track.
Daniel.
Microphone.
Do you believe that the allegations that Smartmatic Dominion manipulated the election results are credible? And if so, why did Fox News settle for almost $1 billion?
Can't really speak to the Fox News perspective on that story, but I mean, I've looked at the paper trails myself. Does Smartmatic trace back to entities that are connected to not only business people in Venezuela, but people within the Venezuelan government? Yes, it does, and that strikes me as highly problematic.
Yes, sir.
It shouldn't be. We should not have voting machines from Venezuela.
Thank you so much. Two quick points. Working Families Party, can you speak to how they use placeholders in a big Democratic primary with their lawyers in this swap? And talk about how the media is using nonprofits now, like the Gothamists. Is that too big?
Thank you very much.
It's a little outside of my investigatory wheelhouse, the Working Families Party stuff. I really threw these slides together about this stuff within the last 24 hours, to be honest.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But this is, I don't think the average person really understands how power works. I think these organizations that are still positioned as underdogs are extremely powerful and have access to infinite funding. I just think we have a lot of this stuff really deeply backwards. And I feel very comfortable of my personal accusation that the Working Families Party is really Soros' local vehicle for influencing elections, because it has millions and millions of dollars of his.
And we need to become nonprofits like that.
Well, this is actually kind of a common thing, I think. But yeah, the money has to move around somehow, right? And it seems like one of the big gripes that I have with the nonprofit world is that you could fill out the forms, to say, I'm starting a social justice nonprofit. It's called Social Justice Nonprofit, and they will approve it. They will just approve it, and you don't necessarily have to have a website or social media or anything that proves that you're actually doing any societal good. And then once that entity is found to be doing something bad, we still don't really shut those entities down, to be honest. We really do not do that. The only time we really shut those entities down is when they do not pay their taxes for upwards of 3 years.
Mike, I'd like to ask a question if I might. This is something I noticed today. The FCC came down with stronger rules about news media, or a bit worse yet, social, like these views, The View, and others, like a late night Jimmy Kimmel. They're now going to enforce the equal protection law because they haven't till now. They've sort of not. So in the same vein as what you're talking about, all these not-for-profits, the criteria should be looked at, and they should see what's really going on.
So, to add to what you're saying, I think that when it comes to nonprofits, there's certain things, there's certain issues, certain work that the government should want to farm that work out to a nonprofit who specifies in that thing and is an expert in that thing and can serve the community, right? So taking care of foster kids or feeding the homeless or whatever it may be. There's lots of causes that we have no reason to even debate, right? But I think the lack of enforcement in that sector has been extremely weaponized and manipulated.
Look at Minnesota.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's it's called a dual role of these organizations forming around a single subject matter, advocacy about that matter, but then also getting hyper politically engaged when that was not the original intention. And no one ever gets in trouble for violating these C3, C4 PAC rules, ever. No one does it.
Lady here. Larry.
Yeah, thank you so much for your work. I think.
Mike.
Thank you so much for your assiduous work. I think you've set out an essential template for everybody here or our side to do exactly the same thing. So a good friend who's in politics said to me about a year ago that the reason why New York is failing is the fault of the rich. And you pretty much laid that out for us, because these people would not be as successful as they are. They would not be achieving at this level if they weren't bankrolled by wealthy people. So where are the wealthy people of New York? Where are the billionaires who pretend to be caring about politics in New York, yet don't get behind equal measures like you have laid out?
I would say that New York City's mega donor class cares a lot about all of this stuff, but they're unable to affect low voter turnout, and that all of these organizations drive big voter turnout, right? So it's the worse voter turnout is, the more powerful these small groups are, and all of these small groups are connected, have similar funding, same ideology, etc. So they're a strong voting bloc because of low voter turnout. But if we had even normal voter turnout, they wouldn't be as powerful.
I have a question. For so many decades, European socialists and socialists in general bemoaned the fact that they could not make headway in the United States, They could not get, and they all debated and discussed why union workers were not becoming members of the Socialist Party, why they couldn't develop a Socialist Party in the United States. So is it just money that has enabled them to get so far? How has it happened?
It's ideology as well, and the way to convert unions into socialist voting blocs is to just get DSA members in there and have them work hard on climbing the ranks of leadership, and they've been very successful.
And the
at that.
members allow them to take over their organization?
Yeah,
It took them a while to get so clever, I guess.
they work very hard at it.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean, and taking nothing away from the great work you've been doing, there's a fellow, Peter Schweitzer, has been writing books forever and ever, and bestsellers, top of Amazon. So this issue has been out there, you adding your own flavor to it, but why, despite all the bestsellers that Schweitzer's produced, it seems like we're still at square 0.0.
I would say that Peter Schweitzer has done an amazing job explaining this stuff for many years, but he didn't build a machine to counter the existing machine. He was just talking about the problem extensively. I'm an enormous fan and friend.
Thank you.
Stand up a long time, right here, right in front of me.
Marcia?
Excuse me.
He's asked a million
Sean.
questions.
Yes, sir.
Talking about unions, are there any George Meanies out there?
George Meany.
All right, George Meany, he was the first president of the AFL-CIO, and he kicked the communists out. He was a plumber from the Bronx.
Unfortunately, there's not.
No, that's not.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much for this presentation, very eye-opening. My question is, have you presented this at all in Washington DC to anybody in the government? Do they know about all these connections? Or is this information that we are being introduced to?
I put this together just for you guys.
Well, I mean, would Pete Hexteth or with Judge Janine want to know about this, or Pam Bondi want to know about this, so she doesn't friggin' arrest people? I wish she would arrest somebody already. I'm so sick of her not arresting people. Everything I write to her, when are you arresting people?
Can we go back to your question?
Yeah, anyway, I want to know, this is a great presentation. We are all here. I don't have a lot of money that I can throw behind this, but like you have people in DC that there's a team in government, in a Republican government there, that make America great again. Well, this is not the way. This is not the way, and I think this needs to be presented in DC. Have you reached out to people?
Let us speak a response.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is information that I would like to share with decision makers.
Jim?
Yes, sir.
Do you want a journalist? I can give
There
you
you
a
go.
journalist.
That way, behind.
Thanks so much for coming out, and we understand that your health and safety is very much in order. It's been reputed when Zandani was running for, Mamdani was running for mayor, that Wahhabi money coming out of the far militancy of Saudi on the one hand, and through the 12er elements of Shia Islam out of Qatar was channeling money through Act Blue. And to what extent is that true on the one hand? The other is, and it goes to that woman's point about why is there not, prosecutions coming from the Department of Justice when fraud is being easily proven here by you? Thank you.
I would say that we're starting to
What? We'll go to Q&A.
donations.
Sorry, on the top. I just laid down and stretched my legs a little.
$1 million, and you're only finding
I went like, oh, I did, that's true.
It seemed to just get brushed aside. So
Oh.
we do have a serious, I mean, I thought it was a really big deal, but we seem to have a problem with following through on enforcement, really at the federal level. And, you know, there's so many problems in the country competing for attention within the administration. And like imagine there's like 100 things on everyone's desk competing for attention, and they're trying to figure out like what do I focus my energy on today.
Are these people captured? I mean, we're talking 3 million pages out of the Epstein files. Are these either elected officials or dear Bondi? Prime example. Well, I know that maybe nobody in this room knows, but, and it's not just the United States. The Republic of Ireland, Great Britain, France, the Netherlands, Belgium.
Yeah.
Ukraine.
I think the world is more complicated than any of us really think it is. And it's really just my job to conduct investigations, to try to raise them one by one by one. And I actually try to really tailor this as locally as possible. And yeah, I was working on this till like an hour before I came.
Wow.
Very
good. All right, 2 more questions, but, last time there was someone here who claimed that I never call him, and if he's here tonight, please stand up, let me know. No, all right, sir.
You had a slide which shows the Newsweek article, I think it was in 2020.
Microphone. He's got it, it's just soft spoken.
There's a Newsweek article from 2020 showing the connection between rather than DSA support for Antifa. Now, 2 questions. Does that still hold good today? And second, given the fact that Antifa was recently designated as a terrorist organization, what do you think the implications are there for ruling that the DSA, as a supporter of a terrorist organization, is illegal? And what do you think about the chances of that coming to light? And
I would say that what it proves is that there are Antifa cells around the country that are affiliated with the DSA publicly as of 2019, and this sort of gives a framework to backtrack a little bit and acknowledge, one, that it exists, and then to try to identify which groups they are and which regions of the country that they're functioning in. But the designation is fairly new, and so you can't prosecute them from something from 6 years ago, especially if you aren't able to identify them. But it does give a little bit of a roadmap of where to start looking to investigate.
Yes, sir.
Pass this back, please.
No, this man in the,
Yeah, thank you.
That's what I said. Pass it back.
Okay, what you brought to our attention is vitally important. And I think that the current mayor, the snake oil salesman, is full of shit. And I think he's vulnerable, and I think...
do you have a question?
The question is it possible that our current mayor will be culpable for his interacting shenanigans with all this illegal money and everything else? Will he be vulnerable to prosecution if the facts surface and people are aroused and mobilized to get rid of this poison?
Yeah.
Foreign money, what's a foreign money?
I do believe we're heading that direction.
Hi, I just want to thank everybody. I'm also with One City Rising with Jason, but one of the things I just wanted to ask is, to your great question and all the great questions in the audience, that we are actively raising funds for our organization, and what will help us is if you could join our mailing list, because the more people we have, we're a grassroots organization, so the more people we have who are part of our group, the easier it is for us to go out to donors and make a case for why it's important to work with us. We have a great newsletter. We publish twice a month. We have one coming out. Jason writes for the newsletter. I write for it, a few others. And it comes out definitely once a month, sometimes twice a month. We have really, really good articles. Jason's article tomorrow, which is coming out tomorrow morning on ICE, is fabulous. You're gonna love it. We have another piece we regularly write about, to your question, about what we can do together to work, to try to fix what's going on in New York City. How did we get here? How did we?
Is it on the website? Is it on the website?
Okay, sorry, thank you.
You have a sign-up sheet?
I am not prepared. But I'm gonna, I promise, I'll get it to you. Perhaps your president can circulate an email. It's very easy. It's onecityrising.org. And that's our website. You can just go to the website, sign up for the newsletter. We don't charge a membership fee. Everything is confidential, but it would really help us to build out our mailing list. We have a couple thousand people already. I'd like to get to 10,000. Just onecityrising.org. One City Rising, O-N-E, yes, One City Rising, one word, .org. onecityrising.org.
No, O-N-E.
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 Yes, O-N-E. Thank you.
One City Rising.
I'm Maria, Dan.
Maria.
All of those, for those of you who are always asking what you can do, now you know, and that's a great way to wrap up. And we really thank our speakers for coming.